Hi, if you saw my last video on the LMDrum, my deep dive, you will know it ended somewhat abruptly when I couldn't select anything other than the ride symbol. I had done firmware updates and it wasn't working properly, and it had been doing that. It'd done that a few times basically, so I had assumed it was a mechanical issue of some sort, and I was all set for sending it back, but I hadn't finished what I wanted to do and I wasn't happy with what I'd done. There was a couple more bits I wanted to show you. So I've tried and tried, done a few firmware updates and factory resets. Well, I couldn't actually update the firmware because it wouldn't talk to the computer. So because it started doing things like that and then I couldn't upload samples to it, I thought possibly it is firmware, and I have done another factory reset. So I've done a few now and it seems to be working. So while it's working, I'll do this. I won't return it if it doesn't do it again, possibly just some really weird software glitch. Anyway, extra things and some corrections on what I've said, because a couple of people got back to me with some extra information. So yeah, first thing I'd like to show you is this thing with the LM snare. So I'd assumed the LinnDrum snare was the one that was 10 milliseconds out, not the LM snare, and it is actually the LM1 snare. And if we look down here, we can see when we're in the LM bank, looking at the snare there, there's an offset. So there is actually that offset off the EPROM data. So it is in here. And when you play the kick and the snare together, it sort of flams, doesn't it? And just to check it wasn't my ears thinking there was something happening, put them at the separate outputs and recorded them into Logic. And if we look here, we can see that the snare is a bit delayed compared to the kick. If we play this actually, the kick moves. Snare does a little tiny bit. I'm not sure if that's programmed in deliberately to give it a bit of a looseness of an old drum machine, but it's doing it. Worth noting anyway. Editing the sample then, just to double check as well, and just changing the start point. Whoops. Gives us this. So you can definitely hear there that we're changing from sort of a flam between the kick and the snare to it being much tighter. And again, just to double check, because your mind can play tricks on you when you're doing stuff like this. Here we've got it with the air at the start of the snare. You can see we've got two peaks on the kick and the snare. This is two samples at the same time. It's reducing, and then when I've changed the start points to the correct place, you can see we've just got one peak, and then moving it back again, we get two peaks again. So that looseness on that snare is definitely in there. The next thing I thought would be quite interesting to look at is that the bass, the toms, and the congas have all got a filter on them, and the filter's slightly different on each. So if you load a sample into all of them, it sounds slightly different. So I've done that using white noise. If I come into, is it bank 9? Yeah, here we go. So that's taking a full sample, it's got a VCA on it, and it's got a filter. Whereas the crash is just playing the whole sample. So's the snare. The open hi-hat's playing the full thing, but the closed hi-hat has got this little VCA on it. Then we've got the congas. And they've got a filter on them as well. The ride doesn't. If we go to the toms, again, the filter's there. I had planned on showing this before, but I just ran out of patience. But yeah, I really wanted to just show that it's not just a sampler. It's not just sampled all the sounds and playing them back. The clever little bits are, as we saw in the previous videos, the fact that it's got the variable sample rate and this and the VCA on the hat. It does really emulate the LinnDrum. I mean, I've not got a LinnDrum. In fact, I did look at one. There was one for sale recently, but because I knew this was coming out and now I've got this, it really has made me think twice about getting one. Because in this, we do have the drum tracks as well. We've got the Simmons SDS, I think it's the SDS7, but don't quote me on that. And I also thought it was the DMX. It's not the DMX. Well, I don't think it is anymore. I think it's this. It's the Movement Computer Systems drum computer, or the Movement Computer, TMC. And that's a lot cooler than having the DMX in here. Someone mentioned it in the comments, and TMC, it does make more sense than DMX. I couldn't for the life of me work out what TMC was. So yeah, that's pretty cool. And then the next thing I wanted to do is, because a lot of people have asked, is what's it like compared to this, the GForce IconDrum, and there's this, the VPROM from AlyJamesLab. Starting in chronological order then with the LM1, and this is the AlyJames VPROM based on the LM1. And this is the famous Prince one, isn't it? You'll notice we don't have a crash or a ride on here, and that's because originally there was no crash or ride on here, but you could buy eventually an EPROM for the crash and the ride, and I think it took up 4 or more EPROMs because they could only hold so much data. So that's one thing that's lacking on this. But what's really cool about it is that if we go into here, we can load different EPROM data chips, basically. So you load in the actual binary files that you'd burn onto an EPROM. So if we come back here, I'll just play something. So we've got 8 programs in the machine. You can save your own, change it all you like. Go crazy, a bit more experimental, but this one might sound familiar because the From the Tears for Fears shout demo I made on the LMDrum in my other videos. And these are from the DigiSound Rock Kit, which is a sample of From the Levee Breaks by Led Zeppelin. So you can load in your own. The AlyJames website has got links to some of these. It's got all the Drumulator binary files, for example, which is what these are from. So it's nice that you can load your own in. If we come back to, well, let's unload those. Let's go back to the stock sounds. We can tune these or detune these an awful lot. Much more than you could on the originals. Go all the way down to 1 kilohertz. All the way up to 44. At the start of Dorothy Parker, that, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah, so a nice sounding thing, but if we come here to the SEMs, these are the filters I played with on the Behringer earlier, the bass, the conga and the tom. Can't really hear much going on with the stock sounds. But if I load in something else, so come back onto the proms again. I know this tom's got a load of noise in it, so when I come into the SEMs and I disable a filter, plus we've got this pulse offset, so we can make the transient a bit longer or shorter. So a little bit of tweakability in here, but it's definitely one for people that are interested in the vintage EPROMs. Come to the sets here, we've also got multiple outs as well. So if we look at this in Logic, here's our multiple outs. One for each of the tones, low tom, high tom, cowbell, etc. Just like you got on the original. And also, if you take a look at these little wiggles here, you can automate all those tuning parameters and stuff, little bits I was playing with. I've not done anything interesting, just wiggled them to see if they work, and they do. Okay, next up then is this. It's the IconDrum from GForce, and this is obviously an emulation of the LinnDrum. And to do this, they used 2 LinnDrums, which both had distinct sounds. So when we go into the sounds that we've got in here, we've got LM1 and LM2. They're sounds from the 2 different LinnDrums they used. Each of these have been processed through 80s hardware, modern hardware, and then taped through an old worn tape machine. That's Linn 2. And they are very different, aren't they? So we don't have the option of loading different sounds into this. We're limited to what it comes with, but what we do have above and beyond the VPROM is a delay, a reverb. So delay and reverb send for each channel, for each sound. Plus we've got a main filter. We've got a low pass, high pass there as well. And we've got a compressor and we've got distortion. So there's a lot more to play with from that perspective. And what that means is that we can have hundreds of different presets, all making use of the effects. I should mention that it does actually come with this, which is a MIDI pack full of grooves, sung by our wonderfully talented friend Alex Ball and Dave Spears, Mr. GForce himself. What it means is that you can get up and running really quickly. And of course we get separate outs for everything. We've got a main out there, and you can see all the separate outputs along the bottom. Only main difference here is that the toms only get one channel for all 3 toms, and the congas only have one channel for both the congas, but we do have a delay and reverb out as well. And we can control everything via CC. So although these two are based on LinnDrums, they've got a similar sound, obviously, but they are based on completely different things. VPROM's great if you want to load in different sounds and play with the binary files. IconDrum's just really handy to get those sounds up and running really quickly and to save all your effects and everything in a single preset. Haven't showed the detuning thing yet on the IconDrum, but just to show you, where's the snare? Here we go. We're still getting that crunch in there. Something else I wanted to do on these two is look at the hats and see what the hats do. If I play the hats on the V drum, and hear the change, and it doesn't simply just repeat the same hats. If I play the first one over and over, repeat it, much more mechanical. So the VPROM is doing the hi-hat trick. Is the IconDrum, that's just playing, obviously MIDI file, here's the MIDI file above it, you can see there. And if I play the first one repeated, it's the same. The IconDrum doesn't do that hat thing, but it does say in the manual it doesn't do the hat thing. It says they prefer to focus on the methods used in their later instruments. And just to get a little bit geeky, here's the LinnDrum snare from the LMDrum, and here it is from the IconDrum. They are a bit different. If we go to snare 1, it's a lot different on the IconDrum. Sounds a little bit broken, that one, doesn't it? Quite nice though. And then I just wanted to just try and reduce the pitch, see what happens. So we've still got all that bright top end in there. How does this do it? And what about the VPROM? Let's go to the LM bank on this, shall we? It's bank 2, that's the pads. So, pretty similar, but let's go down. So this goes down 2 octaves, so it'll go from 24 kilohertz to 12 to 6. So let's bring this one down to about 6, shall we? Similar amount of fizziness, perhaps. Let's make sure we're about the same level. It's hard to tell for the different levels. It's a bit higher, isn't it? Let's just bring that down there. Yeah, I'd say that VPROM is definitely doing that variable bitrate thing. It's still got the crunch there. They don't sound identical, but they're doing very similar things. It's difficult to work out exactly what's happened, if that's important, because they both sound nice. But because the IconDrum seems a bit less bright than the others, I wanted to see if it sounded like a standard sampler when pitching it down, because the variable sample rate effect isn't as obvious when there's limited top end. So to double check, and because I'll no doubt be asked, I've sampled the IconDrum into Logic Sampler and played it 2 octaves low. That's that. And then playing the IconDrum itself 2 octaves low, using the pitch here. That's a lot crunchier than this. So yeah, it doesn't sound the same as simply pitching it in Logic Sampler. The sampled snare sounds more like it's filtered, which is what you'd expect. Hopefully that wasn't too geeky for you, but basically the VPROM and the IconDrum both do similar things. They sound different. They're based on different machines, obviously. Interesting that I started to use the LMDrum as the benchmark there to see what was happening. But yeah, all in all, LMDrum the more I dig into it, the more I look at it, the more it's doing the things that the LinnDrum did. So if you've got any other ideas for little experiments with it, do let me know. And I was thinking, as I say, of buying a LinnDrum just to stick it against it and play with it. But now I've played with the IconDrum, and that was 2 separate drum machines, and they both sounded different. I'm not sure what the validity will be, as long as it's doing the cool stuff you want it to do. One other thing that all these drum machines did was have really loose MIDI, so I might look at something along those lines soon. But hopefully you got something out of that. Hopefully it was of some use to somebody somewhere. If it was, please do subscribe, ring the bell, join me over on Patreon. Patrons get access to all sorts of samples, patches, tutorials, and other little goodies. And of course, I'm supported by my affiliate link. So if you're planning on getting one of these, do click on one of the affiliate links in the description. Thomann and Andertons are normally very good. They've normally got them in stock if you're in Europe. Sweetwater have them in the States, but they do tend to be a little bit later. And do take a look on the starskycar.com website as well. Patches, samples, stuff to download, free bits and bobs on there, some fun stuff for you perhaps. So again, thanks for staying to the very end, and I'll see you next time.